students, welcome to the lecture on communication, and after this lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives. Discuss the concept of communication, discuss the importance of communication, explain the scope, purpose of communication, discuss the process of communication, explain the communication models, define the communication theories, understand 7 C's of effective communication, explain the factors responsible for growing importance of communication, define the channels of communication. Let's start with a brief introduction to communication. The word communication derived from the Latin word communic, that means to impart, to participate, to share, or to make common. It is a process of exchange of facts, ideas, and opinions, and as a means that individual or organization share meaning and understanding with one another. Let us now talk about the concept of communication. Communication is the process of interaction with people and environment. Two or more individuals interact and influence the ideas, beliefs, and attitudes of each other. They can exchange information through words, gestures, signs and symbols, expressions, etc. The elements of communication. The key elements of communication are: communication is a two-way process. It involves a sender and a receiver. The sender or the receiver can be an individual or a group. There has to be a message. The message can be information, a directive, an inquiry, a feeling, an opinion, an idea, or any other. Commonness of understanding. Communication can occur only when there is commonness of understanding between the sender and the receiver. Words, phrases, idioms, proverbs, gestures, and expressions are deeply colorized and possess high communicative potential for people from similar background. Modifying the behavior of other individuals. The information transmitted to the receiver evokes a response in the form of some change in his behavior. The method of giving information. Information can be given through words or through other means like signs, gestures, expressions, etc. The objectives of communication. Various objectives of communication are information. One of the most important objectives of communication is passing or receiving information about a particular fact or a circumstance. Advice. Advice is an important objective of communication as it involves personal opinions and is likely to be subjective. Order. Order is an authoritative communication. Orders may be written or oral, general or specific, procedural or operational, mandatory or discretionary. Suggestion. Suggestion enjoys great advantage over other means of communication like advice or order. Persuasion. It is an important objective of communication. In the office or the factory, the lazy, the incompetent, and the disgruntled workers have to be persuaded to do their work. Education. Education is a very conscious process of communication. The main purpose of education is to widen knowledge as well as to improve skills. Warning. Warning is a forceful means of communication as it demands immediate action. Raising morale. Morale boosting is only possible through communication. High morale results in better performance. Motivation. Motivation energizes and activates a person and channelizes his behavior towards the attainment of desired goal. The essentials of good communication. Find out the real purpose of communication. See that ideas are clear before communicating. Where appropriate, consult others while planning. Communication. Be sincere and honest in communication. Communicate in a simple, clear, and effective way. Know the basic content of the message. Study all the conditions, physical and human, whenever we communicate. Whenever possible, convey something of help or value to the receiver. Communicate in advance as much as possible. Ensure that actions are consistent with your communication. Follow up on all communications promptly. Be a good listener. Moving on, let us talk about the importance of communication. There is more to communication than just talk and gesture. Listening, understanding, and interpreting are as much integral to communication as words verbal, written, or gestured. Communication process. The communication process involves a sender or communication source, the subject matter of the communication, expressions used for communicating, encoding, the medium of communication, the receivers of the communication and the interpretation thereof, decoding and feedback. The importance of communication in business. Communication is a crucial decisive factor in business relations. It is very important to say the right things at the right time and at the right place when dealing with partners, customers, stakeholders, media, and sometimes even competitors. The importance of communication in the workplace. The most difficult part of running an organization is managing the human resources. Communication is that lubricant which keeps this resource moving throughout the organizational machinery. The importance of communication in leadership. Communication is the best equipment a leader can employ to achieve this goal. Even ideals resting upon strong principles can fall flat and fail to motivate due to lack of effective communication skills. The importance of communication in relationships. The lack of communication in relationships they result in frustrations, misunderstandings, unrealistic expectations, guilt, and can create personal differences. The relationship communication problems can only be solved through active and effective communication. Now let us talk about the scope and the purpose of communication. Business communication has a wide scope covering everything within branding, marketing, advertising, customer relations, research, reputation, management, and even employee engagement. The scope for business communication within and beyond. Business communication can either take place within an organization or outside of it. Within the organization, the communication takes place among the management and the employees. Internal business communication involves effective communication of strategies and plans and emphasis on the corporate culture and the shared values. External business communication involves the establishment of company branding and marketing ideas and strategies. The purpose of communication. For instruction. The instructive function unvarying and importantly deals with the commanding nature. It is more or less of directive nature. For integration. The integration function of communication mainly involves bringing about interrelationship among the various functions of the business organization. It helps in the unification of different management functions. For information. The purposes or function of communication in an organization is to inform the individual or group about the particular task or company policies and procedures, etc. For evaluation, examination of activities to form an idea or judgment of the worth of task is achieved through communication. Evaluating one's own inputs or others' outputs or some ideological scheme demands an adequate and effective communication process. For direction, communication is necessary to issue directions by the top management or manager to the lower level. For teaching, a complete communication process is required to teach and educate workers about personal safety on the job. For influencing, a complete communication process is necessary in influencing others or being influenced. For image building, a business enterprise cannot isolate from the rest of the society. There is interrelationship and interdependence between the society and an enterprise operating in the society. For employees' orientation, when a new employee enters into the organization, at that time he or she will be unknown to the organization programs, policies and culture, etc. Communication helps to make people acquainted with the co-employees, superiors and with the policies, objectives, rules and regulations of the organization. We shall now talk about the process of communication. The 6 elements of communication process are sender, message, encoding, channel, receiver, and decoding. Communication process or cycle. The transmission of sender's ideas to the receiver and the receiver's feedback or reaction to the sender constitute the communication cycle. The process of communication involves the following elements. Sender or the transmitter. The person who desires to convey the message is known as the sender. The message. It is a subject matter of any communication. It may involve any fact, idea, opinion, or information. Encoding. The communicator of the information organizes his idea into series of symbols, words, signs, etc., which he feels will communicate B to the intended receiver or the receivers. Communication channel. The sender has to select the channel for sending the information. Communication channel is the media through which the message passes. Receiver. The person who receives the message is called the receiver, or the receiver is the person to whom the particular message is sent by the transmitter. Decoding. Decoding is the process of interpretation of an encoded message into the understandable meaning. Decoding helps the receiver to derive meaning from the message. Feedback. The reaction or the response of the receiver is known as feedback. Brain drain. On whole process, there is a possibility of misunderstanding at any level and is called brain drain.
Communication starts with an idea. To be able to communicate, we must have an idea, a notion, something we want to express, information to share, etc. Our past experiences, values, attitudes, knowledge, culture, feelings, all influence our ideas and the way that we interpret the ideas of others. These influences are our unique perceptions or the way we view things around us. Before ideas can be transmitted to another person or group, we must encode these ideas. Think back to your history classes or football. What does a group at war or a team do when they don't want the other side or team to understand? They place that information or team play into code. In other words, they encode the idea. Now that the idea is encoded, it's ready to be transmitted or sent to another person or group. The encoded idea is called the message. The message is sent to a receiver. This is just like in a football game. The receiver is to catch the football. A telephone has a receiver in which you are able to hear the person on the other end of the line. The receiver must then interpret the message by filtering the new information through their past experiences, culture, attitudes, values, knowledge, and feelings. This interpretation is called decoding the message. The sender needs to make sure that the receiver understood the message. Therefore, it is the receiver's job to convey a message back. The receiver's reply to the sender is called feedback. The feedback allows the sender to ensure that the original message was interpreted correctly by the receiver. Once the cycle has gone full circle, it will repeat itself for as long as the conversation continues. We could even say that the sender and receiver change roles throughout the process, depending on who is sending the message and who is responding to feedback. Now that we understand the general idea about how the cycle works, let's look at a few other pieces of the communication process. The messages that are transmitted between senders and receivers are sent through channels. The channel essentially determines how the message will be sent. For example, if I wanted to tell someone hello, I could wave say hello or text hi to someone with my cell phone. The messages will be the same, however, the manner in which I chose to send it varies. Think about the decisions that you have to make if you want to give someone a present. Will you give it to them yourself, mail it through the post office, or ask a friend to deliver it for you? Messages can be sent through many channels. For example, speaking face-to-face, instant messaging, writing letters, making facial expressions, or even watching television. Another important piece of the communication process is the context in which a communication takes place. The context includes everything from the emotions of the communicators, the reasons for the communication taking place, and where the actual communication takes place. So far, we have looked at the communication process and how it works in ideal situations. However, sometimes the process is interrupted. Something that interrupts, distorts, blocks, or interferes with the process is referred to as a communication barrier. Loud noises, bad phone connections, language, attitude about the topic or speaker, the temperature, and a broken hearing aid are all examples of the communication
there is a possibility
barriers.
of misunderstanding at any level and is called brain drain. Effective communication. Communication is the basic need of life. We cannot imagine a day without some kind of verbal or non-verbal communication. We are either misunderstood or understood incompletely. In both the cases, the purpose of communication is defeated. Features of effective communication. Common frame of reference. The sender and the receiver should interact at a common level of understanding. Mutual interest. The contents of the communication should be of mutual interest to the sender and to the receiver. Communication is likely to break down with an unwilling receiver because the receiver's efforts to receive the information will be minimum. Common language. Language is the strongest means of verbal communication. Verbal interaction between the sender and the receiver is easy and effective if they speak a common language. Common environment. Common environment promotes successful communication. Common environment with cover areas activities are common nationality, common economic status, common culture, common social interests, common age group, common professions, etc. General guidelines for effective communication. The clarity of purpose. This requires careful planning. Lack of planning becomes the first major barrier in communication. Shared activity, it means that all of them have a share directly or indirectly in many different ways in the process of communication. A common set of symbols. The encoding and the decoding of the message should be done with symbols that are familiar to the sender and to the receiver. Focus on the need of the receiver. Whenever we communicate, we must keep in mind the needs of the receivers of the message or the information. It should be our endeavor to see that whatever we communicate should be of value to the receiver, both in the short run and in the distant future. Active listening. Active or participative listening is as important as any other element in the process of communication. Controlling emotions. Emotions play an important role in interpersonal relationships between superiors, subordinates, and colleagues in an organization. Politeness. This leads us to the tonal aspect of communication, the tone of voice, the choice of language, and the congruency or logical connection between what is said and how it is said influence the reactions of the receiver. Eliminate noise. Every possible effort must be made to eliminate the element of noise that distorts communication at the transmission stage. Clarity assumptions. No effective communication can be based on assumptions. The sender of the message must clarify his assumptions and then go ahead with proper encoding of the message. Avoiding connotations and ambiguities. Semantic problems can be solved by using simple language and avoiding connotations. Care must be taken to see that the receiver of the message does not have to go beyond the text of the message. It is also necessary to avoid all ambiguity, which means to avoid using words with double meaning. Social or psychological aspect. As communication is a two-way process involving both the sender and the receiver, both should make conscious efforts to understand each other's cultural and social backgrounds or psychological backgrounds. Completeness. One must also endeavor to send a complete message furnishing all necessary facts and figures. Incomplete communication annoys the receiver, as a result of which proper feedback will not come. Conciseness. Completeness does not mean inclusion of unnecessary details or diversions. An effective communication is concise and crisp. Shannon's model. One of the earliest models of communication that introduced was Claude Shannon's model. This was introduced in 1948. In Shannon's model, the information source typically refers to a person who then sends a message with the use of a transmitter. The signals that are sent and received can be varied depending on the method of communication. The box at the bottom called noise refers to any signals that may interfere with the message being carried. The receiver is the instrument or the person on the other side that receives the message. Berlow's model. In this model, the stress is on the relationship between the person sending the message and the receiver. According to this model, for the message to be properly encoded and decoded, the communication skills of both the source and the receiver should be at the best. The communication will be at its best only if the 2 points are skilled. Scram's model. Scram emphasized in 1954 that both the sender and the receiver take turns playing the role of the encoder and the decoder when it comes to communication. We should always keep in mind that each of these models has both the advantages and the disadvantages. Now let us discuss the communication theories. The communication theory is the necessary key in order to make all transactions and business connections successful. The basic communication theory. The basic communication theory is also regarded too as the one-way communication strategy that is known to be the earliest theory known. It is the process by which information is transmitted from the speaker to the receiver following a linear illustration. The two-way communication process. The basic communication theory is also regarded too as the one-way communication strategy that is known to be the earliest theory known. It is the process by which information is transmitted from the speaker to the receiver following a linear illustration. How to apply the communication theory? Communication between people and groups are necessary in the workplace, and since it can be said that the clarity of the transfer of information helps develop better working relations in business, the application of the communication theory is very important. The levels of communication theory. There are 4 main levels of communication theory that represents a different depth at which we are sharing information with another person. Automatic impersonal levels of communication. This lowest level of communication is a non-involvement method of dealing with people. The conversations at this level provide minimum disclosure. This usually includes greetings, superficial conversations about weather, and casual acknowledgements of strangers and acquaintances. Factual impersonal levels of communication. This second levels of communication is to share information what is factual. When you introduce yourself to someone and mention that you just lost your pet, or when you tell your roommate look that you took out the trash, you are reporting facts. Personal, impersonal level. In the third levels of communication, we are providing our opinions. This level exposes more of who you really are and how you think, and creates greater risk for you compared to just reporting facts. When you let other people hear about your opinions, attitudes and beliefs, you are allowing them to see more of you. The personal level. The fourth and the deepest level of communication is when theory you share your feelings with people that you are close to. The second and the third levels of communication, facts and opinions, provide a two-dimensional picture of who you are. When you add in the sharing of your feelings, you get a complete three-dimensional image of yourselves. Let us now talk about the 7 C's of effective communication. There are 7 C's of effective communication which are applicable to both written as well as oral communication. The 7 C's of effective communication are completeness. The communication must be complete. It should convey all the facts required by the audience. Conciseness. Conciseness means wordiness. That is, communicating what we want to convey in least possible words without foregoing the other C's of communication. Consideration. Consideration implies stepping into the shoes of others. Effective communication must take the audience into consideration. That is, the audience's views, backgrounds, points, mindset, education level, etc. Clarity implies emphasizing on a specific message or goal at a time rather than trying to achieve too much at once. Concreteness. Concrete communication implies being particular and clear rather than fuzzy and general. Concreteness strengthens the confidence. Courtesy. Courtesy in message implies the message should show the sender's expression as well as should respect the receiver. Correctness. Correctness in communication implies that there are no grammatical errors in communication. Correctness. Correctness in communication implies that there are no grammatical errors in communication. Let us now talk about the factors responsible for growing importance of communication. The factors are responsible for the growing importance of communication are growth in the size and multiple locations of organizations. Most of the organization is growing larger and larger in size. The growth of trade unions. Over the last so many decades, trade unions have been growing strong. No management can be successful without taking the trade unions into account or into confidence. Growing importance of human relations. Workers in an organization are not like machines. They have their own hopes and aspirations. Management has to recognize them and should work with the spirit of integration so that human relations may be maintained. Public relations. Every organization has a social responsibility towards their customers, the government, the suppliers, and the public at large. Advances in behavioral sciences. Modern management is deeply influenced by exciting discoveries made in behavioral sciences like psychology, sociology, transactional analysis, etc. Technological advancement. The world is changing very fast owing to scientific and technological advancements. These advancements they deeply affect not only the methods of work but also the compositions of groups. Now we shall discuss the channels of communication. Communication channels refer to the way this information flows within the organization and with other organizations. Decisions and directions flow upwards or downwards or sideways depending on the position of the manager in the communication web. Decisions and directions flow upwards or downwards or sideways depending on the position of the manager in the communication web. Working of a communication channel. Through a modem of communication, be it face-to-face conversations or an interdepartment memo, information is transmitted from a manager to a subordinate or vice versa. The importance of communication on channel. A breakdown in the communication channel leads to an inefficient flow in information. Employees are unaware of what the company expects of them. They are uninformed of what is going on in the company. The types of communication channels. The number of communication channels available to a manager has increased over the last 20 odd years. Video conferencing, mobile technology, electronic bulletin boards, and fax machines are some of the new possibilities. The types of communication channels are formal communication. Formal communication channels. Formal communication is organized and managed information that is shared with relevant individuals in order to secure coordinated action throughout the organization. Formal communication channels are based on an individual's role in the organization and distributed in an organized way according to the established chain in organizational charts. Informal communication channels. Informal communication in the workplace satisfies a variety of needs, particularly social and emotional, and is not based on the positions individuals occupy within the organization. As a result, the communication is not managed or planned in an organized fashion. Unofficial communication channels. Good managers will recognize the fact that sometimes communication that takes place within an organization is interpersonal. The unofficial communication channel in an organization is the organization's grapevine. It is through the grapevine that rumors circulate. An example of an unofficial communication channel is social gatherings among employees. Now in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. Business communication is an extensive sphere, and in a business, communication is optimized to share and extend information and deal after efficiently using the same medium to promote the business products and services. Communication channels refer to the way this information flows within the organization and with other organizations. Communication is that lubricant which keeps this resource moving throughout the organizational machinery. A breakdown in the communication channel leads to an inefficient flow in information. Verbal interaction between the sender and the receiver is easy and effective if they speak a common language. Motivation energizes and activates a person and channelizes his behavior towards the attainment of desired goals.